The neon sign flickered erratically above the entrance to Murphy's Tavern, casting intermittent red light across Jake Morrison's face as he hesitated at the door. At 24, he'd spent plenty of nights in dive bars, but tonight felt different. Tonight, he was here because of a rumor, one that seemed too wild to be true. "Dude, I'm telling you, Mrs. Brennan is in a metal band," his roommate Connor had insisted earlier that week. "My cousin saw her at Murphy's last Friday. Said she was up there screaming into the mic like some kind of banshee." Jake had laughed it off. Diana Brennan, his college friend Tommy's mom, was many things. Beautiful, sure, with that striking red hair and those green eyes that seemed to see right through you. But a metal vocalist? The woman who made them sandwiches when they studied for finals? Who always asked about his classes and whether he was eating enough vegetables? But Connor had been insistent, and Jake's curiosity had gotten the better of him. Tommy was visiting his dad in California for the month, which meant Jake could investigate without the awkwardness of explaining why he was suddenly so interested in his friend's mother's alleged musical career. The bar's interior was exactly what he'd expected. Dim lighting, sticky floors, and the lingering smell of cigarettes that no amount of air freshener could quite mask. A decent crowd had gathered for a Wednesday night, mostly locals nursing beers and shooting pool. Jake grabbed a Guinness from the bartender and found a spot near the back, checking his watch. According to Connor's cousin, the band, Crimson Reverie, or something equally dramatic, usually took the stage around 9. 9 o'clock came and went. Jake was beginning to think he'd been pranked when the lights dimmed further and a voice crackled over the sound system. "Ladies and gentlemen, Murphy's Tavern is proud to present Scarlet Requiem." Jake nearly choked on his beer. There, walking onto the small stage with the confidence of someone half her age, was Diana Brennan. But this wasn't the Diana he knew. Gone were the conservative blouses and sensible jeans. Instead, she wore black leather pants that hugged her curves, combat boots that added inches to her already impressive height, and a fitted band t-shirt that showcased arms he'd never realized were so toned. Her auburn hair, usually pulled back in a practical ponytail, hung loose around her shoulders in wild waves. She gripped the microphone stand with both hands, her green eyes scanning the crowd with an intensity that made Jake's pulse quicken. When her gaze passed over him, he held his breath, but she showed no sign of recognition in the dim light. The drummer counted off, and the first chord hit like a physical force. Jake had expected amateur hour, maybe some middle-aged rebellion that would be more embarrassing than impressive. He couldn't have been more wrong. Diana's voice erupted from her small frame with a power that seemed impossible. It wasn't just screaming, it was controlled, melodic, haunting. She moved across the stage like a predator, commanding attention from every person in the room. The band was tight, professional, and Diana was their undisputed leader. Jake found himself mesmerized. This woman had been making him grilled cheese sandwiches and asking about his internship search, and all the while she'd been harboring this incredible talent, this fierce alter ego. As she belted out lyrics about betrayal and redemption, Jake began to see her in an entirely new light. The set lasted 45 minutes, each song better than the last. When they finished, the crowd erupted in cheers and calls for an encore. Diana smiled, actually smiled, and Jake realized he'd never seen her look so genuinely happy. She was glowing with the kind of satisfaction that comes from doing what you were born to do. As the crowd began to disperse, Jake debated his next move. Part of him wanted to slip out unnoticed, to preserve the comfortable dynamic he'd always had with Tommy's mom. But a larger part, the part that had been captivated by the woman on stage, couldn't leave without saying something. He made his way toward the stage area, where Diana was packing up her equipment. Up close, he could see the sheen of sweat on her face, the way her chest rose and fell as she caught her breath. She looked up as he approached, and her eyes widened in recognition. "Jake? Oh my God, what are you doing here?" She looked mortified, like a teenager caught sneaking out. "Please tell me Tommy didn't." "Tommy's in California," Jake said quickly. "He doesn't know. I just..." Connor heard about your band, and I had to see for myself." Diana's cheeks flushed red beneath her stage makeup. "This must be so weird for you. I mean, I'm just Tommy's boring old mom, right?" "Boring." Jake shook his head, still processing what he'd just witnessed. "Diana, that was incredible. You're incredible. How long have you been doing this?" She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture so familiar it made Jake's chest tight. "About 3 years now. I started taking voice lessons after the divorce, just as something for myself, you know? The instructor mentioned that I had the range for metal, and, well, one thing led to another." "Tommy has no idea? Are you kidding?" "He thinks I spend my evenings doing crossword puzzles and watching Netflix." She paused in her packing. "Which, to be fair, I do sometimes. But this is just for me. My secret rebellion, I guess." Jake found himself leaning against the stage, unwilling to let the conversation end. "You're amazing up there. The way you command the room. It's like you become someone else entirely." Diana looked at him carefully, as if trying to gauge his sincerity. "It does feel like that sometimes. Like I can be the person I was before I became a mother, before I became a wife, before I became all these other things that define me." "You mean you can just be Diana?" "Exactly." She smiled, and Jake felt something shift in his chest. "Though I suppose I should start thinking of myself as Scarlett when I'm up there." The guys insisted on stage names. "I'm still getting used to it." Jake grinned. "Scarlett suits you. Very rock goddess." Diana laughed, a sound he'd heard countless times in Tommy's kitchen, but somehow it felt different now. More intimate. "Rock goddess? I think you're being generous. I'm just a 43-year-old divorcee who likes to scream into microphones on Wednesday nights." "Don't sell yourself short." Jake's voice was more serious than he'd intended. "What you do up there, it's art. It's passion. It's sexy as hell." The words hung between them, and Jake immediately wished he could take them back. Diana was Tommy's mother. She'd known him since he was 19, had probably changed his friends' diapers. There were lines, boundaries, rules about these things. But Diana didn't look offended. Instead, her green eyes darkened, and she studied his face with an intensity that reminded him of how she'd looked at the crowd during her performance. "Jake," she said carefully, "I think maybe you should go home." He should have agreed. Should have apologized for overstepping and left immediately. Instead, he found himself saying, "What if I don't want to?" Diana set down the microphone she'd been holding. "You're Tommy's best friend. You're practically family. I'm also a grown man who's attracted to an incredible woman." The words came out before he could stop them, and Jake felt his face burn with embarrassment. "Shit. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." "How long?" Diana's voice was quiet. "What? How long have you felt this way?" Jake ran a hand through his dark hair, debating whether honesty was the best policy. "I don't know. Maybe always, somewhere in the back of my mind. But seeing you tonight, it's like someone turned on a light." Diana was quiet for a long moment, absently coiling a cable around her arm. The bar had mostly cleared out, leaving them essentially alone near the stage. "I used to think about you sometimes," she admitted finally. "After you'd leave the house. Wonder what it would be like if circumstances were different." Jake's heart hammered against his ribs. "And now?" She looked up at him, and he saw conflict in her expression. "Now I think we're both adults, and maybe circumstances don't matter as much as I thought they did." The space between them seemed to shrink, though neither had moved. Jake could smell her perfume mixed with the lingering adrenaline of her performance, could see the way her lips were slightly parted as she breathed. "Diana." "My bandmates call me Scarlett," she said softly. When I'm here, when I'm this version of myself, I'm Scarlet. Scarlet, he repeated, and the name felt dangerous on his tongue. What happens now? She stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Now you buy me a drink and tell me what you really thought of the show. And then, we'll see what happens. Jake flagged down the bartender, his mind reeling. He'd come here expecting to satisfy his curiosity about his friend's mother's alleged musical hobby. Instead, he discovered that Diana Brennan had depths he'd never imagined, and more importantly, that the attraction he'd always tried to suppress was apparently mutual. They found a quiet booth in the back corner, away from the few remaining patrons. Diana had thrown a leather jacket over her stage outfit, but she still looked nothing like the woman he'd known for 5 years. This version of her, Scarlet, was confident, edgy, unafraid to take up space. "So," she said, taking a sip of her whiskey, "what did you really think? And don't spare my feelings. I can handle criticism." Jake considered his words carefully. "I think you're wasted on Wednesday nights at Murphy's Tavern. You should be playing real venues, recording albums." Diana smiled wryly. "I appreciate the vote of confidence, but let's be realistic. I'm 43 years old. The music industry isn't exactly looking for middle-aged female metal vocalists." "Age is just a number," Jake insisted. "Look at someone like Tori Amos or Bjork. They're still making incredible music well into their 40s and beyond. And metal has its share of older artists who are legends in the scene." "It's not just about age," Diana said, swirling the amber liquid in her glass. "It's about life. I have responsibilities. Tommy's still figuring out his career, and even though he's an adult, he needs stability from me. I can't just pack up and chase rock star dreams." Jake leaned forward. "Who says you have to choose? You could start small, build a following. Play bigger venues on weekends. Tommy's 24. Diana. He'd probably be proud as hell to have a rock star mom." Diana laughed. "A rock star mom who's sleeping with his best friend?" The words hung in the air between them, acknowledging what they'd both been dancing around all evening. Jake felt his mouth go dry. "Is that what we're doing?" he asked. Diana met his gaze steadily. "I don't know what we're doing. All I know is that for the first time in months I feel awake, like all my nerve endings are firing at once." Jake reached across the table, covering her hand with his. Her skin was warm, slightly rough from guitar calluses he'd never noticed before. "I know exactly what you mean." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, fingers intertwined, both of them processing the magnitude of what was happening. Finally, Diana spoke. "This is complicated, you know, beyond just the Tommy situation. I'm divorced, but I'm still figuring out who I am outside of being someone's wife and mother. And you're just starting your career, your adult life. The last thing you need is to get involved with someone like me." "Someone like you?" Jake's voice was incredulous. "You mean someone intelligent, talented, beautiful, and passionate about life?" "Yeah, that sounds terrible." Diana smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "Someone with baggage, Jake. Someone who's already failed at marriage, who has a son your age, who doesn't know if she's brave enough to really go after what she wants." Jake squeezed her hand. "What do you want, Diana? Right now, in this moment, what do you want?" She looked at him for a long time, her green eyes searching his face. "I want to stop overthinking everything. I want to feel like Scarlet for a little while longer." "Then let's get out of here." Diana raised an eyebrow. "And go where?" Jake grinned. "I have no idea. Wherever Scarlet wants to go." They left Murphy's Tavern together, stepping out into the cool night air. Diana's car was parked around back, but instead of heading toward it, she turned in the opposite direction. "There's a place I like to go sometimes," she said, leading him down a side street. "When I need to think, or just be alone with my thoughts." They walked in comfortable silence, their hands brushing occasionally as they navigated the empty sidewalks. The city felt different at night, more intimate, full of possibilities. After about 10 minutes, Diana led him through a gap in a chain-link fence and up a small hill overlooking the downtown area. "It's not much," she said, settling onto a worn wooden bench that someone had dragged up there years ago. "But the view is nice." Jake sat beside her, close enough that their thighs touched. The city spread out below them, a tapestry of lights and shadows. "It's perfect." They sat in comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Diana spoke. "I feel like I should be more conflicted about this," she admitted. "About you, about what's happening between us. But sitting here with you, it just feels right." Jake turned to face her. "Maybe that's because it is right. Maybe all the reasons we can think of why this shouldn't happen don't matter as much as the fact that it feels like it should." Diana smiled. "When did you become so wise?" "I learned from the best. This woman I know, she's incredibly smart and independent. She taught me that sometimes you have to trust your instincts, even when logic tells you otherwise." "She sounds like a remarkable woman." "She is. She's also sitting right next to me." Diana laughed, a sound that Jake realized he wanted to hear every day for the rest of his life. The thought should have terrified him, but instead it felt like coming home. "Jake," Diana said softly, "if we do this, if we see where this goes, there are going to be challenges. People who don't understand, who judge us based on age or history or whatever other reasons they come up with." "Let them judge," Jake said firmly. "I'm not interested in living my life based on other people's opinions." "And Tommy?" Jake was quiet for a moment, considering. "Tommy's my best friend, and I love him like a brother. But he's also an adult who wants his mother to be happy. If he can't see that you deserve to have someone who appreciates everything about you, including the parts of you that he doesn't even know exist, then that's his problem to work through." Diana reached up and touched his face, her thumb brushing across his cheekbone. "You really mean that, don't you? Every word." She leaned closer, and Jake could smell her shampoo mixed with the lingering scent of the bar. "I haven't done this in a very long time," she whispered. "Done what?" "Felt like a woman instead of just someone's mother or ex-wife." Jake's heart ached for her, for all the years she'd apparently spent sublimating her own desires and identity. "You're all of those things, Diana. But you're also Scarlet, and you're brilliant, and you're the most captivating woman I've ever met." Their faces were inches apart now, and Jake could feel her breath on his lips. The anticipation was killing him, but he didn't want to rush this moment, didn't want to push her faster than she was ready to go. Diana solved the dilemma by closing the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that was soft at first, tentative, then deeper as they both gave in to the attraction that had been building all evening. She tasted like whiskey and possibility, and Jake had to resist the urge to pull her closer, to deepen the kiss until they both forgot where they were. Instead, he let her set the pace, following her lead as she explored this new dynamic between them. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Diana rested her forehead against his, her eyes closed. "This is crazy," she whispered. "The best things usually are." She opened her eyes and looked at him, and Jake saw desire there, but also uncertainty. "I don't know how to do this, Jake. I don't know how to date someone, how to be with someone new. My marriage, it wasn't good toward the end. I'm out of practice with all of this." Jake took her hands in both of his. "Then we'll figure it out together. No pressure, no expectations. We'll take it one day at a time and see what happens." Diana smiled, and for the first time all evening, it reached her eyes completely. "One day at a time." "Starting with tomorrow," Jake said. Have dinner with me. Somewhere nice, where we can talk without worrying about who might see us. Are you asking me on a proper date, Jake Morrison? I absolutely am, Diana Brennan. She considered this for a moment. In that case, yes. But I get to pick the place. Deal. They stayed on the hill for another hour, talking about everything and nothing. Diana told him about her divorce, about the loneliness she'd felt for the past few years, about discovering music as a way to reclaim pieces of herself she'd lost along the way. Jake shared his own struggles with finding his place in the world, his fears about the future, his growing certainty that traditional expectations weren't necessarily the right path for him. By the time they made their way back to their cars, the sky was beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn. Diana looked exhausted but happy, more relaxed than Jake had ever seen her. I should probably get home, she said, fishing her keys from her jacket pocket. Get a few hours of sleep before I have to pretend to be a responsible adult again. Jake caught her hand before she could open her car door. Diana? Yeah. Tonight, seeing you up there, being with you like this, it's the best night I've had in years. She stood on her tiptoes and kissed him again, brief but sweet. Mine too. As Jake watched her drive away, he realized that everything had changed in the span of a few hours. He'd walked into Murphy's Tavern thinking he was investigating a rumor about his friend's mother. He was leaving with the knowledge that he was falling hard for an incredible woman who happened to be his friend's mother, a distinction that suddenly seemed far less important than it had a few hours ago. The next evening, Diana chose a small Italian restaurant on the other side of town, far from anywhere they might run into someone they knew. She'd spent the day alternating between excitement and panic, trying on half her wardrobe before settling on a simple black dress and boots. She felt like a teenager getting ready for prom, which was ridiculous at her age. Jake was already there when she arrived, and he stood when he saw her approaching the table. He'd clearly put effort into his appearance. Dark jeans, a button-down shirt that brought out his eyes, hair that looked like he'd actually styled it instead of just running his fingers through it. You look beautiful, he said, and Diana felt herself blush like she hadn't in years. You clean up pretty well yourself. Dinner was easier than she'd expected. Away from the intensity of the bar and the hill, they fell into a comfortable rhythm of conversation that reminded Diana why she'd always enjoyed Jake's company in the first place. He was intelligent without being pretentious, funny without trying too hard, and he listened to her in a way that made her feel heard. Tell me about your music, he said over dessert. How did you end up in a metal band? Diana laughed. Sheer accident, really. I started taking voice lessons about a year after the divorce, just as something to get me out of the house. My instructor, Marcus, was this classically trained guy who'd played in symphony orchestras for 30 years. But he'd always had a secret love for metal, and when he heard my voice, he recognized your potential. He heard me warm up one day with some old Janis Joplin, and he got this look in his eyes. Made me try some Nightwish, then some Lacuna Coil. Turned out I had the range and the power for symphonic metal, which isn't something you discover every day. Jake leaned forward, fascinated. And the band? Marcus knew some guys who'd been looking for a female vocalist. They were all session musicians, really talented but tired of playing other people's music. We clicked immediately. Diana smiled at the memory. The first time we jammed together, I felt like I'd found my tribe. Like I'd been holding my breath for 40 years and could finally exhale. That's how I felt watching you perform, Jake admitted. Like I was seeing the real you for the first time. Diana reached across the table and took his hand. Maybe you were. Maybe I was too. After dinner, they walked through the downtown area, window shopping and talking. The conversation flowed easily between them, touching on everything from books to travel to their respective dreams for the future. Diana found herself sharing things she'd never told anyone, including her ex-husband. I used to write poetry, she admitted as they paused in front of a bookstore window. Terrible, angsty teenage poetry that I was absolutely convinced would change the world. Jake grinned. Do you still have any of it? God, I hope not. Although... She paused, considering. I have been writing some lyrics lately. For the band. They're probably just as terrible, but they feel more honest than anything I've written before. I'd love to hear them sometime. Diana looked at him skeptically. You might regret that offer. They're pretty dark. Lots of themes about rebirth and breaking free and finding yourself in the wreckage of your old life. Sounds perfect for metal. They ended up back at the hill overlooking the city, drawn by the same impulse that had brought them there the night before. This time, Diana settled more comfortably against Jake's side, her head on his shoulder as they watched the lights twinkle below. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, she admitted quietly. For this to start feeling wrong or complicated or impossible. And it just keeps feeling right. Jake pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Maybe that's because it is right. Maybe all the complications exist in our heads, not in reality. Diana tilted her face up to look at him. When did you become such an optimist? About 5 minutes after I realized I was in love with you. The words hung in the air between them, heavier and more significant than anything either of them had said before. Diana felt her breath catch. Jake. I know it's too soon, he said quickly. I know we've only been doing this for 2 days, and I know there are a million reasons why it's crazy. But I also know that I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. Diana was quiet for a long moment, processing his words and her own feelings. Finally, she spoke. I love you too, she said simply. It terrifies me, but I do. Jake cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, deep and thorough and full of promise. When they broke apart, both of them were shaking slightly. What do we do now? Diana asked. Now we stop overthinking and start living. Over the next several weeks, they settled into a routine that felt both natural and thrilling. Jake would show up at Diana's house after work, and they'd cook dinner together, talking about their days and their dreams. He'd help her practice new songs, offering feedback and encouragement as she worked through lyrics and melodies. On Wednesday nights, Jake became a regular at Murphy's Tavern, watching with pride as Diana commanded the stage as Scarlett. The rest of the band had accepted his presence without question, and he'd begun helping them with social media and promotion, using skills from his marketing degree to build their following. You know we're getting inquiries from other venues, Diana told him one evening as they cleaned up after band practice in her garage. Actual paying gigs at places that aren't dive bars. Jake grinned. I told you you were wasted on Wednesday nights at Murphy's. It's scary, Diana admitted. Part of me wonders if I'm too old to be chasing dreams like this. Jake set down the amplifier he'd been moving and turned to face her. Diana, you're 43, not 73. You've got decades ahead of you to build something incredible with your music. And you'll be there? Even when things get complicated. Especially when things get complicated. The first real test of their relationship came 6 weeks later, when Tommy called to say he was coming home early from California. Diana spent the day before his arrival in a state of barely controlled panic. Maybe we should wait to tell him, she said, pacing her living room while Jake watched from the couch. Give it more time, make sure this is really something solid before we rock his world. Jake stood and caught her hands, stilling her restless movement. Diana, love, we can't build a relationship on secrecy. And Tommy deserves honesty from both of us. What if he freaks out? What if he can't handle it? Then we'll deal with that together. But I think you're underestimating him. Tommy wants you to be happy. He's told me that a dozen times over the years, how worried he's been about you being alone, how much he wants you to find someone who appreciates you. Diana took a shaky breath. And if that someone happens to be his best friend? Then he'll adjust. Because he loves us both. Tommy arrived the next afternoon, sun-tanned and relaxed from his month in California. Diana hugged him tightly, struck by how much he looked like his father at that age, but with her eyes and her stubborn chin. "You look good, Mom," he said, studying her face. "Different. Happier." Diana and Jake exchanged glances over Tommy's head. They'd planned to ease into the conversation, but Tommy had always been perceptive. "There's actually something I need to tell you," Diana said, leading him into the living room where Jake was waiting. Tommy's eyes moved between his mother and his best friend, and Diana watched as understanding dawned on his face. "Oh," he said quietly. "Oh, wow." "Tommy," Jake began, but Tommy held up a hand. "How long?" he asked. "About 2 months," Diana answered honestly. Tommy was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Diana held her breath, waiting for anger or disgust or rejection. Instead, Tommy started to smile. 2 months, and neither of you thought to mention it? I've been gone for 4 weeks, and you couldn't find time in any of our phone calls to say, 'Hey, by the way, I'm dating your best friend,' or, 'Hey, I'm dating your mom?'" Diana blinked in surprise. "You're not upset?" Tommy laughed. "Upset? Mom, I've been worried about you for 3 years. You've been so focused on taking care of everyone else that you forgot to take care of yourself. And Jake." He turned to his friend. "You've been mooning over someone for months but wouldn't tell me who. I was starting to think you were having some kind of quarter-life crisis." "You knew?" Jake asked. "I suspected. You got this dopey look on your face every time Mom texted or called while we were hanging out. And Mom, you started humming around the house, which you haven't done since before the divorce." Diana felt tears prick her eyes. "So you're okay with this?" Tommy stood and hugged her tightly. "I'm more than okay with it. I'm happy for you. Both of you." He pulled back and looked at them seriously. "But if either of you hurts the other one, you'll have to answer to me." Jake grinned. "Understood. Good. Now, can we please talk about something else? Because as okay as I am with this, I don't need details about my mom's love life." That evening, the 3 of them had dinner together, and Diana was amazed by how natural it felt. Tommy regaled them with stories from California, and Jake caught him up on work and mutual friends. The dynamic between them had shifted slightly. There was a new awareness, a recognition of changed relationships, but the fundamental affection remained unchanged. After Tommy went to bed, Diana and Jake sat on her back porch, sharing a bottle of wine and processing the day. "That went better than I expected," Diana admitted. "Tommy's a good kid. Man, I should say. He's more mature than I was at his age." Diana leaned against Jake's shoulder. "I can't believe he's okay with this. I've been so worried about disrupting his life, changing the dynamic he's always known." "Maybe he was ready for the dynamic to change. Maybe he's been waiting for you to start living for yourself instead of just for him." Diana considered this. "It's hard, you know. Switching from thinking of yourself primarily as a mother to thinking of yourself as a woman with her own desires and goals." "You don't have to choose one or the other," Jake pointed out. "You can be both. You can be a mother who also happens to be a rock star, a woman who raised an incredible son and is now building an incredible relationship." Diana smiled. "A rock star? I think you're being generous." "Have I mentioned that Scarlet Requiem has been booked for a weekend festival next month? 2 full sets, headlining Saturday night." Diana's eyes widened. "What? How do you know that before I do?" Jake grinned. "Because Marcus called me this afternoon. Apparently, the booking agent wanted to deal with your manager, and he gave them my number." "You're not my manager." "I could be." I've got a business degree and a lot of opinions about your career trajectory." Diana laughed and kissed him soundly. "You're insane." "About you?" "Absolutely." The festival was everything Diana had dreamed of and more. Playing for a crowd of several thousand people, seeing the sea of faces singing along to songs she'd written, feeling the energy of the audience feed back into her performance, it was intoxicating. Jake watched from the side of the stage, his chest swelling with pride as Diana owned every moment of their set. She'd grown so much as a performer over the past few months, gaining confidence and stage presence that transformed her from a talented amateur into a true professional. After their set, they were approached by a record label representative who'd been in the audience. The conversation was preliminary, but there was talk of a recording contract, of touring opportunities, of a future that suddenly seemed much bigger than Wednesday nights at Murphy's Tavern. "This is really happening, isn't it?" Diana said later that night as they lay in bed in their hotel room. "This could actually be a career." Jake traced lazy circles on her shoulder. "It's what you deserve. What you've worked for. It's going to mean changes. Travel, irregular schedules, time away from home. And I'll be there for all of it. If you want me to be." Diana turned in his arms to face him. "Always. I want you there for all of it." 6 months later, Scarlet Requiem released their debut album, Phoenix Rising, to critical acclaim and surprising commercial success. Diana, now known professionally as Scarlett Brennan, had become something of a sensation in the metal world, praised for her powerful vocals and compelling stage presence. The success brought challenges. There were tours, long hours, and the pressure that came with sudden fame. There were also critics who questioned her age, her background, her right to claim space in a male-dominated genre. Through it all, Jake remained her anchor. He'd left his marketing job to become the band's full-time manager, using his skills to build their brand and navigate the music industry. More importantly, he was there every night, watching from the wings, reminding her of who she was beneath the stage makeup and leather. "Do you ever regret it?" Diana asked one night as they sat in their tour bus, driving through the desert toward their next venue. "Giving up your career to follow me around the country?" Jake looked up from his laptop, where he'd been reviewing the next day's schedule. "This is my career now. And even if it wasn't, I'd rather be anywhere with you than anywhere without you." Diana smiled and moved to sit beside him. "I love you, Jake Morrison." "I love you too, Scarlett Brennan." She laughed. "At home, I'm Diana. Remember, at home, on stage, in interview rooms, on tour buses, you're both. You're all the parts of yourself that make you who you are." Diana kissed him softly, thinking about how much her life had changed in less than a year. She'd gone from being a lonely divorcee hiding her dreams in dive bar performances to being a professional musician with a record deal and a man who loved every facet of her identity. It hadn't been easy. There had been difficult conversations, adjustments, moments of doubt. But every challenge had been worth it for the life they'd built together. "No regrets?" she asked. "Only one," Jake said seriously. "That it took me so long to get up the courage to go see you perform that first night." Diana grinned. "Well, we'll just have to make up for lost time." "I'm counting on it." As their bus rolled through the night toward the next city, the next show, the next adventure, Diana reflected on the unexpected turns life could take. She'd thought her story was mostly written: divorced mother, empty nester, woman slowly fading into middle-aged invisibility. Instead, she'd discovered that some stories don't really begin until you think they're ending. 2 years later, Diana stood in the wings of the Red Rocks Amphitheater, looking out at 20,000 screaming fans. Scarlet Requiem had just finished their sound check for what would be the biggest show of their career, headlining one of the most prestigious venues in the country. "You ready for this?" Jake asked, appearing beside her with a bottle of water and that same encouraging smile he'd worn at Murphy's Tavern 3 years ago. Diana accepted the water gratefully, her hands shaking slightly with pre-show nerves that never quite went away, no matter how many stages she'd conquered. "As ready as I'll ever be." "Tommy called," Jake said, checking his phone. "He's in the VIP section with Sarah. Says he's proud of you and to kick ass up there, Mom." Diana laughed. Tommy had adjusted to their relationship better than anyone could have hoped, even serving as best man when she and Jake had gotten married in a small ceremony the previous spring. He'd brought his new girlfriend, Sarah, to several shows, and Diana loved watching her son beam with pride as he told people, "That's my mom up there." "Mrs. Morrison," Marcus called from across the backstage area, using her married name with a grin. "5 minutes to places." Diana felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came before every performance. 3 years ago, she'd been hiding this part of herself, convinced that dreams had expiration dates and hers had long since passed. Now she was about to headline Red Rocks at 46, with a platinum album, a devoted fanbase, and a husband who believed in her dreams as much as she'd learned to believe in them herself. "I love you," Jake said, pulling her close for a quick kiss. "Go show them what Scarlett Brennan is made of." Diana adjusted her leather jacket, a custom piece now, designed specifically for her by a fan who'd become a friend, and walked toward the stage. As she gripped the microphone stand and looked out at the sea of faces illuminated by phone screens and lighters, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. It had started with a rumor and a young man's curiosity. It had grown through late-night conversations on hills overlooking the city, through the terror and exhilaration of taking risks, through the patient support of someone who saw all of her. Diana the mother, Diana the woman, Scarlett the performer, and loved every facet equally. The opening chords of their signature song rang out across the amphitheater, and Diana opened her mouth to sing. Her voice soared over the crowd, strong and clear and absolutely certain of its power. In the wings, she could see Jake watching with the same look of wonder and pride he'd worn that first night at Murphy's Tavern. Some love stories, Diana had learned, don't follow traditional timelines. Some don't care about age differences or complicated family dynamics or the opinions of people who think they know what's appropriate. Some love stories begin when you least expect them, with someone who sees not just who you are, but who you could become. As the crowd sang along to words she'd written about rebirth and second chances, Diana smiled. She'd found her voice in more ways than one, and she'd found a partner who would stand beside her as she continued to discover all the ways she could use it. The music swelled, the crowd roared, and Diana Brennan, rock goddess, devoted mother, beloved wife, and unstoppable force of nature, gave them everything she had. Just as she always would, for as long as her voice held out and her heart kept beating in time with the rhythm of dreams that refused to die. In the audience, Tommy Morrison stood with his arm around Sarah, watching his mother command the stage with the same fierce love he'd seen her bring to every aspect of her life. Beside him, in the VIP section Jake had insisted on for family, sat Jake's parents, who had initially been shocked by their son's choice to marry an older woman but had quickly fallen under Diana's spell. "She's incredible," Sarah shouted over the music, and Tommy nodded, his chest tight with emotion. His mother had spent so many years taking care of everyone else, sublimating her own dreams and desires for the sake of family stability. Watching her now, radiant and powerful and completely in her element, he felt a deep satisfaction knowing that she'd finally found her way to this moment. As the final notes of the song faded and the crowd erupted in thunderous applause, Diana looked directly at the VIP section, finding Jake's face in the crowd. She blew him a kiss, then raised her fist in the air in triumph. This was her life now, unpredictable, exhilarating, and absolutely perfect in its imperfection. She'd learned that it's never too late to surprise yourself, never too late to fall in love, and never too late to discover that the person you thought you were was only a fraction of the person you could become. The encore lasted 45 minutes, with the crowd refusing to let them leave the stage. When Scarlet Requiem finally took their final bow, Diana was exhausted, exhilarated, and more alive than she'd ever felt. Backstage, Jake swept her into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed breathlessly. "How does it feel to be a rock goddess?" he asked, setting her down but keeping his arms around her waist. Diana looked around at the chaos of backstage, the crew breaking down equipment, her bandmates celebrating with family and friends, the general atmosphere of triumph and joy that followed a perfect show, and then back at her husband's face. "It feels like coming home," she said, and kissed him as the Colorado stars wheeled overhead and the sound of 20,000 voices calling her name slowly faded into the night. Their story had begun with a rumor and a Wednesday night at a dive bar. It had grown into something neither of them could have imagined. A love that transcended expectations, a career that defied conventional wisdom about age and opportunity, and a life that proved that the best chapters sometimes don't begin until you think the book is almost over. As they walked hand in hand toward the tour bus that would take them to the next city, the next show, the next adventure, Diana reflected on all the ways her life had changed since that night Jake first walked into Murphy's Tavern. She'd been hiding then, afraid to let anyone see the dreams she carried inside her. Now she lived those dreams every day, with a partner who celebrated every success and supported her through every challenge. They'd built something together, a marriage, a career, a life, that honored both of their ambitions while creating space for the love that had surprised them both. The road stretched ahead, full of possibilities neither of them had imagined 3 years ago. But whatever came next, they would face it together, with the certainty that some love stories are worth waiting for, and some dreams are worth chasing no matter when you find the courage to begin. In the distance, Red Rocks stood silent against the star-filled sky, holding the echoes of the night's music and the promise of all the stages yet to be conquered. Diana squeezed Jake's hand and smiled, ready for whatever came next in the extraordinary life they'd built together, one song at a time.